Welcome to the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie Betts. After learning a ton about kidney stones and helping people prevent stones at the University of Chicago, I was fed up with all the terrible advice people were finding online. So I decided to do something about it. The Kidney Dietitian was born. This podcast is for people who want to learn what actually works to prevent kidney stones and still enjoy life, eating, and their favorite foods. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie Betts. And today on the 76th episode of the podcast, I have a very special guest named Laura Koller. She is a fellow dietitian here in the Chicago area, actually. And I am thrilled to have her on the podcast today to talk about a topic that I imagine is on many of our minds on this second day of 2025, which is New Year's resolutions and maybe kind of having a unique spin on how to actually make changes, whether it be for your health or for anything. I know people can make New Year's resolutions about all sorts of things. They tend to be health related, but they can be about all sorts of things that we want to do better. So I'm super, super pumped to have Laura on the podcast because she has really positioned herself and is kind of the expert when it comes to figuring out very unique ways about thinking about behavior change, and whether it be eating less sugar or like whatever your goals are for 2025. Laura, I think, will have some really fun tips for all of us to help make those maybe actually stick. So thank you, Laura, so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Melanie.
Yeah, yes. So before we dive into all of the nitty-gritty fun stuff about behavior change, can you share a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why you're an expert in behavior change?
Oh, goodness. So my name is Laura Koller, and I have been a registered dietitian now for more than 20 years. I've spent actually this month, January of 2025, I will have been working in dialysis for 20
Oh
years.
my gosh. Well, congratulations. We need to like have a
Yay,
cake to
that's super
celebrate.
exciting, right? I did not picture that I was going to become a kidney dietitian. It was something that there was a job and I applied, and this has been such a great spot for me. I was actually a junior high English teacher before I became a dietitian. So I have a big focus on education. That's really a passion of mine. And one of the things that led me to be so fascinated and interested in behavior change is the fact that I work with so many patients that struggle so much with behavior change. And I just always felt like there must be something more that I can do to help these people, because changing behaviors is not easy. And for many dietitians, it's not something that we get a lot of knowledge about and a lot of background when in our training.
Mhm.
And so it's something that I went off and explored on my own. And I learned so many things that were really great for supporting my patients with behavior change, and so many things that just blew my mind, either because it was a totally different way of thinking, or even that it was just such an easy approach. Like, why did I not think of being able to do this? So I now share this expertise not only with my dialysis patients, but I also support other dietitians with behavior change strategies. And as I said, it's so exciting to be able to help someone who's struggling be able to see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel and that they can do this, they can make the change.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be this overwhelming thing. Like, I think, as we'll talk about later, of course, like the things that you talk about seem so simple. Like you said, it's so obvious, like, duh, why don't we do this? But it's just kind of like completely reframing how we go about it. And I just have to say, Laura, I love, love, love the work that you're doing with dietitians and with other healthcare professionals, because I feel like, very often, and I know that there's many dietitians that listen to this podcast. This conversation is a bit more for fellow healthcare professionals, but I feel like um, there so often we get frustrated with the patient, right? Because they're not doing what we want them to do, or patients will often get labeled as non-compliant, and they're like, oh, they're just not going to do it, and they just get written off, and it is heartbreaking, honestly. And I know that that contributes to, I imagine, healthcare disparities in all sorts of areas that we think about health disparities, right? Because we just make all sorts of assumptions about people and don't actually work with them, unfortunately, nearly as often as we should to help them actually make these changes. I think there's such a big difference between nutrition education, which is simply like telling someone like, hey, salt isn't the best thing for your kidneys, versus helping them actually make that change. There's a huge, that those are two completely different things. And that second piece is what's lacking in most healthcare, I would argue. And Laura puts such a wonderful, refreshing spin on how to help patients improve their health. So yeah, I'm just really thrilled to have you here today.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you. And I think you bring up some really important topics because we just traditionally have thought like if I give people the right information, if I give them the fact sheet or the handout, like that's going to be sufficient to meet their needs. And I see you talk about this all the time in your social media and your presentations. We keep thinking like there's one cookie cutter solution that we can hand to everybody to solve their issues. And the truth is that change needs to be individualized
Turns
to
out
each.
people are different.
Yeah. And sometimes, and this is true for your area of nutrition also, sometimes our perceptions about the way that things are supposed to be are like completely removed from what the research says or from what people are actually supposed to. I always think about you and I think about oxalate, right?
Yes, I
And
talk about
everybody
oxalate
thinks,
so
oh, you
much.
have oxalate down, so you just need to eat less oxalate. And I've heard you say so many times, like, no, that's actually a perception, but that's not what actually happens. So it's the same way in terms of behavior change that we think that information will change behaviors. And if that was true, then Google should have solved everything,
We'd all be
right?
eating perfectly, right?
Oh my
Whatever
gosh,
that
we can
means.
access
Yeah.
anything we want at any time. And if information changed behaviors, we would be golden. And then we also think like people, maybe if they're not succeeding, they're not motivated enough. And I
Mm.
think as health professionals, this is kind of an assumption that we make. Like we've talked to them about this like 3 times, 5 times, 17 times, however many times, like they haven't gotten it. There's something that is wrong with this person. They must not be motivated. They must not have enough willpower. They must not be working hard enough. And what I discover when I actually sit down and have these conversations with my patients is that often nothing could be farther from the truth. So you're right. There is a really important part. It's not the information. It's not the motivation. It's this activation. Like, how do we go from wanting to make a change to actually being able to make it? And one of the really surprising things that I will tell you, and we actually talked a little bit about this before we actually started recording, is even when you know all of the behavior change research, it still doesn't mean that you do all the things. Like there's so many times I know I'm observing myself like this is what I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm
Falling into
still
old
to do the
habits.
alternate thing, right? So each and every single one of us is human. We all do human things. We all, struggle with behaviors. And actually, one of the things I can do is tell you about this. This is kind of like a new story that I've started sharing with my patients.
Please
I
do.
also shared it with my son when he was struggling with the change recently too. And he was like, that's a really good one, Mom. I'm like,
All
that's
right. Well,
awesome.
his stamp of approval. Now I have to hear it.
But what I've been telling people is there's actually involved in any specific change, there's 3 characters. There is number one, there's your body, which is really important for us as health professionals. Your body kind of writes the rules. So a lot of times when people are making a change or when people are struggling, like for my dialysis patients, I would say one of the most difficult things for them to do is to manage their fluids because when your kidneys aren't working and you're not peeing, you have to be careful about how much you're drinking because we can only pull off so much fluid during dialysis treatments, right?
Hmm.
And so one of the things I tell people is part of the reason that you're having this problem is not because of any problem with you or any like inherent wrong thing about you. It's the fact that your kidneys aren't working. Like this is their fault. So the rules are different for you than they are for, whoever you're
Maybe a kidney stone former that needs to drink a lot of water.
yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
the rules are different for
Hmm.
you, and that can make things more difficult, right?
Hmm.
So that's
Yeah.
one character in this play. One of the other characters is your brain. And your brain sometimes is a great friend. Like it does all the things, it tells you all the things that you're supposed to be doing, it keeps you on track. But there's also a lot of times when our brains are making up stories and telling us things and saying, hey, I know that you don't want to be eating this chocolate. I know that you want to be limiting your sugar, but that cake looks really good. So this one time, it's going to be fine. There's not going to be a problem. I tell a story too about how I don't drink coffee afternoon because I know when I drink coffee afternoon, I'm not going to be able to sleep. And yet it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and I'm thinking, ooh, that would be really good. And my brain is telling me, I know that like the last 10 times you've had coffee afternoon, you haven't been able to sleep, but it's probably going to be different today.
Yeah,
And
it's worth
I'll
it
go ahead and
today.
have that coffee. And that night I'll be laying awake in bed thinking, oh my God, I knew that this was going to happen. Like, what was I thinking? So there's your brain, right? And you and your brain are not necessarily on the same page all the time. And then the last character is you. It's your desire. It's your want to be successful. And when I look at my patients, I see they're like at the core of their being, like these are people who want to succeed. They want to take care of their health. They want to be successful. And the problem is, like I said, and I tell them this too, like the problem is your body has written different rules for yourself. Like this is the way that things go. And your brain is not always on board with you. And so a lot of our job together is figuring out, how to hack your brain, how to get yourself to do things that are difficult to do. And it's not anything that's inherently wrong with you. I believe and I see that you want to succeed. It's just a matter of managing these other things. And I think that's so important because when people are feeling guilt and shame and all those negative feelings about not being able to do the things that they want to be doing, like that's just an extra hurdle that we have to get over so that people are going to be feeling like they can be successful and they can do the things. So our mindset is such a really important part. And as I said, like that 3 character play, being able to see that, it's sort of like it makes it so it's not you, right?
Yeah. And that's not like a scapegoat. Like it just really kind of highlights the complexity of the situation,
Yeah.
Like there's so much
Mhm.
going on. And I love that point of it's not you. It's not that it's a failure in you. Because I feel like that, as kind of bringing the conversation back to New Year's resolutions, I feel like they are the perfect example of someone who is super motivated. Like, who is more motivated than someone on January 1st, like setting this exciting New Year's resolution? And then I don't know this stat, but isn't it something like by February, like 90% of New Year's resolutions have gone out the window? I don't know. So,
Yeah, I
something
think
like
there's a
that.
date like Blue Monday that's like 2 or 3 weeks into January
Right.
that the day that most people have given up.
Right, right. So that's not a lack of motivation, but clearly there's some disconnect. Like you have the best intentions in the whole world, and it doesn't make you a failure. Like it's not that 90% of people in the United States are lazy or bad people or a failure, like give up. Like there's clearly a piece of the puzzle that just isn't talked about very much. And I feel like Laura will shed some light on that for us as we move forward.
Yeah, and maybe we can talk about some of the things that are getting in the way of people being successful with New Year's resolutions, because really, this is sort of like a really great example of all of the ways that we get change wrong, right? Like all the
Right.
ways that we perceive things are supposed to be, and all the ways that we want to succeed. And
Yeah.
then 3 weeks into the year, we're like, that's just too hard. I think I'll just give up on that and go back to being the old me, right? So, first of all, one of the things is that we try to change all the things at once
Too
and we
much.
try to make these really big changes. You're like, so I'm going to start running for an hour every single day, even though I
I
haven't
haven't run a day
run.
in my life.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. I am going to cut out all sugar from my diet. I'm not going to eat sweets anymore. And I'm going to start preparing all of my meals at home, even though the week before, like maybe you got takeout a few times or something like that, right? So we're thinking we're going to change all of the things. And that is something that isn't super helpful because, first of all, we know that that's overwhelming.
Mhm.
And second of all, because when we're thinking about change, one of the things that we need to be thinking about is not what I'm going to be doing today and tomorrow and next week. What we need to be thinking about is when we really want to make these changes and we know that they're good for their health, these are changes that we want to be making for the long term. And change is consistent action over time. And so we need to be thinking about what is it that I can commit to today that I'm going to be able to do tomorrow and next week, but also next month. And then when I get sick and when I have a family emergency, like I need to have something that is accessible to me. So
Yeah.
if you want to run for an hour and that's something that's great. I would love to see you do that. And if you can do that today and tomorrow, that's fantastic. But if you get to the next day and you're feeling really sore, it might be okay for you to walk for a half an hour, or it might be okay for you to run for 5 minutes.
Hmm.
I've been working on, I want to be more active, and I have a stationary bike in my basement, which is a really great example of a lot of different things. I am not a big fan of exercise equipment, but it's handy when it's in my basement.
Hmm.
I would love to be able to go out and ride my bike outside every single day because I love doing that. But I have decided this is really important, and I have committed to 10 minutes on my exercise bike every morning. And in fact, there are many mornings that 10 minutes, I get down there and I'm like, I can't do 10 minutes today. I'll get on there for 8 minutes or
Hmm.
5 minutes, or I'll get on there and I'll say, I'll just pedal it 100 times. But every single time that I'm getting on that bike, I'm reinforcing that behavior and I'm finishing and I can feel successful. Like I basically, it's like starting the behavior and making it really small. So I think that's one of the things that really gets in our way is that we're trying to do all the things when in fact, we could be a lot more successful if we could just think about starting a new habit and making it small, making it something that's 100% achievable. And then, because this has already happened to me, when life happens and you get really sick or something else blows
Your
up in your
kids
face,
stop sleeping, in my case.
right? Or you
Yeah.
just have a really hard time getting out of bed for like a
Mhm.
whole bunch of mornings in a row, that you can still a week later say, but this is consistent action over time. So maybe I haven't done this for the last week, but I'm going to get back on the bike
Hmm.
again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's not a failure. We have to, it's kind of stepping back and looking at the big picture and saying, it's cool. Like, yeah, my goal is to be on that bike for an hour every day. But right now, I'm going to do 5 minutes a day, and that's going to get me there eventually. And kind of stepping back, kind of, that's what you're essentially saying.
And we keep telling ourselves, but yeah, but if I go for an hour every single day, it means I'm going to achieve my goal faster. And unfortunately, getting on the bike every single day for an hour, if you're not able to sustain that for a week or for a month,
Not
and
helping you in the long term.
yeah, and we
Hmm.
keep picturing our lives of, oh, but like things are going to be different when I start riding the bike every day. Like I'm not going to have problems in my life. Nothing's going to come up. We just need to be prepared for, what is going to be your check in the box on the days when things don't go according to plan. And what you really want to do is just throw it all out the window
Hmm.
because it seems like too much.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So the reason number one that New Year's resolutions are a perfect example of everything wrong about how to make change is that we tend to overdo it. It sounds like we tend to make such grandiose resolutions and we just kind of go overboard. Is there other things that we tend to do wrong with New Year's resolutions?
Well, I think the other thing is just the focus of resolutions. We're often thinking about the destination that we want to be getting
Mm-hmm.
to, like I want to lose 25 pounds. I think weight loss is a really common one. Or maybe you have some other intent or whatnot, but we're very focused on the results. And one of the big problems with making changes is that often it takes a while to see results, especially if weight loss is one of those things that's on your agenda. You could be doing all the right things for a week or a month. And when you step on the scale, like it hardly budges at all, which is not a really great way of motivating ourselves, right? Like we stand on the scale and instead of feeling like, wow, look at me, I'm a month in and I'm still doing the thing, we're thinking, wow, look at me, I'm a month in and the scale says exactly the same thing that it said
Hmm.
at
Yeah.
the beginning of the year. So one of the other things that could be really helpful is instead of thinking about the destination, it's thinking about the process and celebrating the process, celebrating the specific behaviors that you're doing every day. Like the way I look at it is if you start today and get to the end of the day, how are you going to know that you have achieved success today?
Hmm.
Like, did I get on the bike for 10 minutes? I did. great. I can pat myself on the back.
Did I eat a
Woohoo.
serving of vegetables?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
And celebrating those moments. We don't have to wait until you reach this, destination, until you reach the end. What's really, really important is to make sure that we're recognizing all of the small steps, all of the small behaviors that are going to lead to those results, and really like hooping and hollering it up for ourselves and celebrating
Yeah.
those specific successes.
Yeah. And I think it's important to realize also that, especially in the goal of weight loss, even if you don't lose a pound or even if you gain weight, the changes that you're doing, like the eating more vegetables, the moving your body, the maybe eating a little bit less added sugar, whatever it is, that is still going to be helping your health, right? Or in the case of exercise, yeah, like sure, probably more is better. Well, not to a point, obviously, with exercise or anything. Um, but like, the getting on the bike, even just 5 minutes, those are health promoting behaviors. And we have a lot of data that shows that even if you don't meet that goal, whether it is weight loss or whether it is the official number of minutes that you're supposed to be moving your body per week, as every step that you take to get there is still a win for health as well. Not only from like a psychological behavior change standpoint, but those things can improve your health or will improve your health, right? Even if you don't see that outcome that you necessarily are looking for. Does that make sense?
100%.
Yeah.
And your focus may actually be on like losing the weight, but really, if you want to improve your physical functioning and all of the things that really matter, to be honest, your weight is kind of just
A
not
number.
right. It is.
Mhm.
It's just a number. But you being able to ride a bike because you've been on it for the last 2 months and you managed to do most days for 10 minutes, like you're going to be a lot farther ahead in terms of your health and your physical functioning and your mental health and all of those things
Mhm.
than had you started out really big and then just kind of futzed out because that was a really big goal for you to set.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Any other reasons why New Year's resolutions fail?
There's probably like a
We
bajillion
could talk
more
for
that I
hours.
could share, but I mean, like, I think the message here is you want to set small and specific goals. You don't want to say, I'm going to eat healthier. You want to
Yep.
say, I'm going to get on the bike for 10
Mhm.
minutes every day. I'm going to eat a vegetable at each of my meals. And like, make it easy for yourself. Maybe that would be the third thing is that we think like in order for change to be successful, we need to be doing hard things. And in fact, if things feel easy, that's going to make it so much easier for you to achieve your goals. So if you putting a vegetable on your plate, like at dinner every night, means that you take out the bag of baby carrots and that's what you're eating. And that's what you do every single night instead of beating yourself up over, oh my God, all I'm doing is getting the baby carrots. This is easy. Right? I should be making this like mixed vegetable thing. I should be making these ornate recipes. Like you just put dinner on the table and you put out the baby carrots along with it. Like
Mhm.
pat yourself on the back, check in the box.
That's a
Woohoo.
win. Hmm.
Maybe next week when you're at the grocery store, you can look around and decide maybe you want to put some celery or slice up a cucumber. Like just look for little ways to make those changes. And once you get consistent, and sometimes it takes a while to get there. We
Yeah.
think that change is supposed to happen instantly, or we read on the internet that it's supposed to take 21 or 28 days. There is a study out there it's probably 10 years or more from the past, but it shows us that the average time it takes to actually change a behavior and create a new habit is 66 days. That's like
There's
more
so
than
many
2 months.
days.
And the span is anywhere from 3 weeks to 9 months. So if you didn't get it figured out and you're still like beating yourself up about, man, like I'm 2 weeks in, I should be consistent at this, like cut yourself some slack.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it
Nine
sounds like that's
months.
another, yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's another theme is you need to cut yourself some slack. Like stop thinking that you're going to be the superhero overachiever. Like take things in little small bits and pieces because those little small steps are the things that are going to lead to those big changes. And you being able to sustain the small steps is what's going to enable you to keep doing them.
Hmm. Yeah. Ah, good stuff. All good stuff. All right. So moving on to some of your tips and tricks for making change, really helping it stick. This is some of my favorite stuff that you've talked about. There's a example that you always give of putting your pills by a toothbrush, I think. So, but you have lots of lots of like little tips and tricks for just like helping us remember and helping us make that change and really making it small and doable. So, what are some of your tricks like that to help people actually make these changes, in addition to making them realistic and doable for them?
Well, thank you for sharing that example because it's always helpful to hear what's impactful for other people. And you bring up this whole other area that we haven't even talked about, which is how to make things really easy. We keep thinking like we need to get more motivated and do all these self-improvement projects, right? But in
Mhm.
fact, two of the best ways that we can help a habit to stick, number one, are to make things easy, which I think we've already talked about that. And the other one, because so many of us, we forget about the things that we're supposed to be doing until it's too late
Life's busy.
or whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a lot of times I talk to my patients about taking their pills and they're like, they forget, right?
Mhm.
It's not because they didn't want to take them, it's just because they didn't remember to take them at exactly the right moment. So one of the best ways to do that is using environmental cues or prompts, which is pretty much like you just gave an example of a visual cue. So if you need to be taking, for example, your phosphorus binders at every meal, you can put them at your table where
Mhm.
you're normally eating. Or if you like to sit on the chair watching TV and that's where you like to have a snack, like you can have a little bottle there. I have patients that have them all over the place in their glove boxes and their purses so that they're handy. But actually having some kind of a visual cue is something that can be helpful. It doesn't have to be a visual cue. Maybe if you're one of those people who has a very consistent routine, you could set an alarm on your phone and that would be a prompt to remind you to take the pill. Maybe you eat a lot of your meals with somebody else and you can tell that other person, hey, guess what? I'm trying to get more consistent with taking my pills. Could you help remind me? And I always tell people, your friend or your family member is going to be better about remembering your pills than they are going to be about
And they're
remembering their
happy to help. They are
own.
thrilled that they have something that they can do to help you, right?
Oh
It's,
my,
it's not a
yeah, no,
burden.
and I love that perspective too.
Yeah.
So you can have other people, or maybe you have a specific place. And actually, the example that you shared is also an example of a visual cue, but it's also something called habit stacking. So brushing our teeth is a super habit. It's something that most of us have gotten used to doing twice every single day. So since that's something that you're already doing, you can attach this new habit that you want to have happen to that one. So if you want to remember to take your vitamin, but you're not doing that, you can put it right next to your toothbrush. And then every time that you grab the toothbrush, you're going to see the pills there. If flossing your teeth is one of the things that you want to get better at, this was actually something that I like. You would think like I have learned how to figure out how to floss my teeth. It took me a long, long time. And now we have this, it's a glass jar. It's on our bathroom sink, right? And we have all these floss picks in there because we figured out that using the picks is way easier than taking it out of, the long floss, and nobody liked doing that.
I the picks help me tremendously. I just continue need to work on flossing, but if I have the picks in my house, it helps a lot. So ditto to
So
that.
yeah, so you
Yeah.
have the picks, and I keep thinking like, oh, maybe this is creating more waste and everything like that. Like at some point, you need to cut yourself some slack and say, this is going to be the thing that's going to facilitate the behavior and the outcome that I want.
Mhm.
So we're going to stick with this for now until I find something else that I could do instead. But we have that glass jar that's right there. I know when I brush my teeth that flossing is the thing that comes right after. I can see it right there. I will tell you, there are still times when I know I'm supposed to floss my teeth and I can see the pics and I might choose not to do it because
You're
I'm
just like,
supposed
I'm
to,
over it. I just
right?
want to get to bed.
But
Yeah.
like it's one of those things that now I can be consistent with because I've attached it to my toothbrush. You can attach a whole bunch of things, or maybe you have other things that you're doing. Like I go walk the dog after dinner, and I walk the dog with my son. So now I have it. It's an example of temptation bundling, right?
Oh, okay.
Which is um, basically in order to make it more appealing for me to actually follow through on the goal is I associate it with something that I really enjoy, which is I get to hang out with my son while I go take the dog for a walk. If you want to get on the exercise bike, another way that I use that is I have the Libby app, which is audiobooks,
Mhm.
and I have a book, and I start listening to it when I get on the exercise
You can
bike.
only listen to it on the exercise bike, maybe.
Yeah, you could use that, although sometimes I'm like, as long as you have done that on the exercise bike, you can continue listening to it. But that's another example. So I call it, it's kind of like the bait and hook, which
Mhm.
is, the hook is the thing that you don't really want to be doing. And so somehow you're going to offer yourself some kind of bait to make it
Mhm.
more appealing.
Yeah.
So if there's something you don't want to do, what's some positive thing that you can build in? Not like, you're going to celebrate like 3 weeks from now because you've done it, but something that's a feel good in the moment or as soon as you're finished.
Mhm. I love all of these. The thing that keeps popping in my mind as you are giving all of these examples, something that people really struggle with when they're working on oxalate stone prevention is getting in dairy at every meal or getting in some calcium source at every meal. So I'm trying to think of what a good bait might be to try to get that dairy in. Like maybe it could be, it doesn't have to be just like a glass of milk. Like maybe you love, I'm making salmon for dinner tonight, and there's a delicious like horseradish sauce that I make with yogurt, right? So like trying to figure out ways to get you to enjoy that dairy. I feel like I'm kind of missing the point here. Do you have a better example for
No, I
how
mean,
we
I think
might?
it's good. Like you're thinking about what are some forms of dairy that I like and I don't. Like I talk
Hmm.
with patients all the time about, it's really important to eat protein.
Hmm.
And when I go through the list, like chicken, fish, eggs, and they go, oh, I don't like eggs. And guess what? I am not going to come up with 5 ways for them to eat eggs. I might
Right.
say, oh, well, if you don't like eggs, here's 2 ways that patients of mine have liked them, even when they don't like deviled eggs or French toast are a couple of really creative approaches that a lot of people are like, oh, I do like those.
Hmm.
But I'm not going to try and convince somebody that eggs are the way to go if that's not the thing they want to do. I go, okay, you don't like eggs. Which of these other options would be things that you would like to do? And maybe instead of eggs, they'd be fine with chicken or a spoonful of peanut butter, which I
Hmm.
think is like one of the easiest quick
Yeah,
meals that you can
absolutely.
on a bad morning. A spoonful of peanut butter will do you right.
Yeah,
Um,
I have my breakfast a lot of the time is peanut butter and a banana and a glass of milk. I'm not gonna lie, that's when I just like cannot think about what I want for breakfast. That's my go-to. So,
yeah. So, but just thinking about that, like my immediate thing is when I'm thinking about milk, like the way I would make that appealing would be to add some chocolate syrup to it.
hmm, yeah,
I
absolutely.
really like chocolate syrup.
Who
Or
doesn't?
maybe you want to have, I suppose me, I'm like thinking about different meals. Like I just think about milk and cookies,
Hmm.
or I think about ice cream. Like these are my favorite things. I don't think me coming up with a way to eat dairy at every every meal would be a challenge. I think I could definitely do it. But I think brainstorming a number of different ideas. And I think sometimes just having a default too is something that's helpful. Like if I can't think of anything else, then I'll just pour myself a glass of milk,
And
check in
that's
the box.
totally fine. Hmm.
Right.
Yeah, but having some of those things to mix it up, I find is really helpful because 2 or 3 times a day is a lot to be having a glass of milk, right? Like unless you are a milk lover. So, but yeah, I like having the default and being totally fine with just that glass of milk, or having your go-to ways to mix it up when you want to. Like tzatziki is a thing that comes up a lot, like making tzatziki sauce and adding that to sandwiches or to your vegetables as a snack or whatever it is. So yeah, just like whatever works for you. Like thinking around the box. Like maybe you're following me and you all right. Like Melanie said, I got to drink milk. Fine. But like I'm not saying you have to drink milk. Like there's other things that you can do to get in that calcium. And you just need to figure out what works for you, essentially.
And sometimes the thing that you need to do is not something that you like doing. I mean, I have lots of people who have to take pills and they hate
Hmm.
taking pills.
Yeah.
But if you can, after you drink that glass of milk, give yourself a pat on the back or a big cheer, what you're doing is you're reinforcing the positive feelings that you're
Hmm.
having, and those are going to reinforce all of those neural connections in your brain that are going to want your body to say, hey, this is a good thing. It feels good when I do this because after I drink it, these good things happen and I get
Yeah.
these good feelings, right? So
Hmm.
you can create those good feelings even if they don't exist, before.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. All right. Any other little tips or tricks that you have, like the bait and switch or the habit stacking, or not the bait and switch, bait, hook and bait. What do you say? Hook,
The bait and hook, but
bait and
really
hook. Yeah.
sort of
Sorry.
like it's I think the formal term is temptation bundling.
Okay.
Um, One of the other ideas that just pops into my head is something called commitment devices. And this is just ways of like building in some accountability for yourself.
Okay.
So actually a really powerful commitment device would be like to like money commitment devices. Like if you are, making a bet to somebody, or you're saying, if I don't do this, like I've heard about people writing checks to a charity that they really don't like. And,
Oh,
if they don't follow through with
that's
it.
funny. They
So
have to
apparently
send.
those are one of the most successful commitment devices to have, but most of us are hesitant to do that for a number of different
Yeah.
reasons. But a commitment device could be a social commitment device, which means you're telling somebody else, hey, I'm going to be working on this, and I just wanted you to be aware. Like if you're on social media, you can tell your followers, hey, guess what? I'm making a commitment to do this, and I'm going to show up every single day and show you that I've done it. Or maybe you have a friend who you can tell about it, or maybe a friend who's going to actually come and join you. Like if you
In the
you
gym
want
or
to
something.
be walking, or if you want to start some new recipes, like you could do some things that way. I think building connections and those relationships and making sure that we're surrounding ourselves with a good team is something that can be really helpful too. Like I think a lot of the things we've talked about are things that you can do as an individual, but when you have a friend or even, like a dietitian or some other health professional, or even a therapist that you can meet with regularly to talk about what your goals are and reflect on how well you're doing towards achieving those, that can be another really powerful way of just reinforcing the changes and helping yourself to stay on track.
Hmm. Yeah. So many good things. My head is like spinning with like things that we could keep talking about, but we don't want the episode to be 75 hours long. But I think kind of the take home message that I'm getting is to not beat yourself up if you quote fail at whatever New Year's resolution that you make, or even if it's not New Year's, right? Just whatever change you're wanting to make, because this was a 30-minute or whatever conversation about how complicated change is, and it's not easy to do, right? Like I feel like there's just so many assumptions that like, oh, like we've already talked about it, but I feel like it's worth talking about again. Like I'm a failure if I don't do this. And it's not you. It's that it's just really, really hard. Again, if it wasn't hard, everyone would be eating perfectly all the time. And that's obviously not the case. So, like just really giving yourself that grace and thinking about it, it almost feels like painfully detailed, like thinking about change from all these different aspects. But I really feel like that's what needs to be done. Or if you do that, you're going to have a much greater chance of success in meeting your goals than just saying, like, cool, I'm going to eat more vegetables, right? Or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I love how you've summarized all of those different aspects. And there are a couple of things that I want to make sure to highlight. Well, actually, one thing to highlight and one other idea to go on. And I'm hoping I can remember and hold these in my head because you're right, we've covered a lot of territory. Um, and the one is just, choosing one thing that you feel like you can be successful at doing and, giving yourself credit for that. But the other thing is like when you're making a change, you're not just making the change, you're actually creating a new identity, right?
Mhm.
So you are right now somebody who's not doing these things, but you want to be the person who's doing these things. And that is not a transformation that happens overnight. Um, so it's really important to be thinking about who it is that you want to be and what that person would be doing, and remembering that this is a process. It's not something that happens overnight. And in fact, like with some of my patients who are working through and struggling with a lot of these things, I tell them, I'm like, this is like a training program, right?
Mhm.
This is a training program for your health, just like you would be training for a marathon um, or any kind of a 5K or a 10K. You doing things for your health is going to be the same kind of theme that essentially you are going to be needing to do the same behaviors over and over again. And sometimes it's going to feel really boring and not super exciting, but you have to keep showing up. So this is a training program. And just like an athlete would be showing up for their workouts and taking their supplements and medications and working on their nutrition to achieve this identity as being somebody who successfully completes this race and performs at their best, that is also something you can think about yourself like an athlete and doing the same types of things. Even if you're not going to run the marathon or the 5K, like whatever it is, the change that you're making, you are, becoming a better version of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Love it. All right. Well, any last thoughts before we close the episode? I don't even know where to go. We talked about so many things.
I know. I feel like we just covered like so many
Any last thoughts?
But I think the most important thing would be to say is that you have accomplished a lot of things to get to be the person that you are right now. And no matter how you're feeling about yourself right now at the beginning of this new year, you more than likely have these hopes and aspirations and intentions that you would like to achieve sometime this year or right now
lifetime.
or in your life, whatever it is. You have already been successful at doing lots of things in the past, and you have every capability of being successful in doing these things this year too. You are going to encounter struggles. You are going to have setbacks. You are going to have challenges. And just as you have every single other time before, you are going to be able to get yourself back up and, point yourself back towards that destination and keep going. So no matter what's happened already, you give yourself a pat on the back just for showing up, for being here, for listening to this whole podcast episode. And there are lots of different ways that you can achieve success.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. Perfect closing words. So if anyone wants to get a hold of you, because like we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, Laura helps dietitians learn about some of these strategies and kind of is this truly refreshing take on how we think about behavior change. And it really is a whole lot more than just motivational interviewing, which is amazing. I'm a big fan of motivational interviewing, but I think
me too.
There's a lot more, of different ways and strategies that we can use, for different patients. So if people do want to get a hold of you and work with you, Laura, where can they find you?
Well, you can find me on social media at Instagram at Behavior Change for Dietitians. I am also active on LinkedIn. You can find me there at Laura Koller. And I also have a website, which is transformrd.com. And please reach out to me. I would love to be in connection and conversation with you. I am super passionate and excited about these ideas. I could talk about this all day long.
Yeah. Yes. Awesome. And I will link to all of those resources and platforms in the show notes so you can easily get to them. And so thank you everyone for listening to this podcast. I think it's the perfect time to be talking about all of this at the beginning of 2025. So thank you, Laura, for all of your insights and for spending time with us today. And yeah, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Melanie. I've loved being here.
Yeah. And thank you, listeners, for listening. And I will see you next week on the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. Thank you for listening to today's episode. For more help with kidney stones, check out my website, www.thekidneydietitian.org. For more personalized help from me, check out my online course, Kidney Stone Nutrition School. VIP enrollment includes help directly from me. I can't wait to see you there and help you prevent kidney stones. Have a great day.